Here's Al in Vegas. He's the board. He's on Mad Dog Unleashed. Al, good afternoon. How are you today, pal? What's going on?
Hello?
Yes, Al. You're on Mad Dog Unleashed. How are you? Good. Good to have you.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. Listen, one of my favorite managers of all time, and I think you and I could have probably won the World Series with some of the players Torrey had and Stengel and all those guys, and some of the players this guy had was great. But Whitey Herzog is one of my all-time favorites, and you got to have Tony La Russa up there.
You do.
And our guy didn't win a lot, but I think was a great manager. Should be recognized. Felipe Alou was a tremendous manager.
Again, I can't put you, Al, in the top 3 all-time in your sport. You're not in the Hall of Fame. Felipe's not in the Hall of Fame, and Herzog's not in the Hall of Fame.
Well, how can Herzog not be in
I don't think he is. I'd have to look that up. I shouldn't swear on that, but I'm pretty sure there's not a lot of managers out in the Hall of Fame in baseball. And I know Torrey is, Earl Weaver is, La Russa is, Cox is, Stengel is. There's not a lot of them. But I don't know if I put, is Herzog in the Hall of Fame? I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame. I apologize. So that tells you what I know. He is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, man. The big
veteran. Well, it's all Veterans Committee stuff. It's not a writer's thing.
One more thing, Mad Dog, and it was very evident to me in this game at the end. I couldn't understand why. This kid, Stoney, what's his name? Stoney, last name I can't get.
Right.
He's a much better, quicker, faster back than Chubb, and I think he should have played much more at the end of the game.
Sony Michel, yeah, he didn't get the. I don't know what the carries were. I'll look it up right now. I thought they went to Chubb a little too much myself, so I don't think you're wrong on that. I will look at the carries here and see where they stood. That is interesting. If I find a box score, yeah, Herzog is in the Hall of Fame, so I'm wrong on that. My apologies. Now I don't necessarily think. That Herzog is he's a hell of a manager, but I am not putting him there all the time. All right, running backs in that game for Georgia. Let's see. Michel had 14 carries for 90. Boy, look at this. Michel had 14 carries for 98 yards, and Chubb had 18 carries for 25 yards. That's too many carries for Chubb when he had 25 yards, and that's 98 yards for Michel. Now, a couple of those are big runs. But that probably, I don't like the distribution there either. Al's on top of it. Scott in Tampa, he's on Mad Dog Unleashed. Scotty, good afternoon. How are you today? What do you have for me?
I'm doing good, Doggy. Thanks. Before I get to the baseball managers, I think college basketball, Chris, I know because of his persona and a whole history behind him, Bobby Knight has to be ahead of Dean Smith. I mean, Chris, he's got 3 national championships and he's got an undefeated team.
Yeah, you know what? You can make that argument. He's got 3 and he's got an undefeated team. Now, he wasn't there as long. He wore out his welcome. He didn't have the players
I think it's all about his persona that would keep him out of that top 3.
I think also the players that he produced. I mean, Dean produced some of the great players in the history of the sport. And Bobby Knight.
Doesn't that make you a better coach? Well, doesn't that make you a better coach, Chris? He went undefeated with Quinn Buckner and Kent Benson. The biggest thing that everybody ever said was the only person who could ever hold back Michael Jordan was Dean Smith.
2 ways to look at it. That's the one way to look at it. He won with less talent. The other way to look at it is harder sometimes to coach great talent because they're always looking for their own deal. And, most of Dean's guys played at least a couple of years. You could go, if you wanted to go, I know Dean's got a lot more wins, but if you wanted to go Bob Knight, he's a great all-timer. He did coach. Now, you don't go Shula, and he had an undefeated team too, but I wouldn't put Shula in there myself, top 3 all-time in college in NFL football. But if you want to go Bob Knight over Dean Smith, I can understand that. That's not terrible. Go ahead. Next.
And here's the thing on the baseball, Chris. So the baseball one, to me, is the hardest one. Because if you're going to use championships, I mean, then you're taking all Yankee managers between Miller Huggins and Casey Stengel. You got to come up with some other criteria. To me, in the era I've watched baseball, Chris, the best managers I've seen are Earl Weaver, Sparky Anderson, and Joe Torre. And that's just
go ahead.
That's in my era, Chris, from starting to watch baseball in the early 70s till current. Do you think if you go from that era on, would you say it's Weaver, Sparky Anderson, and Joe Torre?
From the 1960s on, you put Spark. You don't want to put Cox in there because he didn't win enough big games. All right. Torrey,
I mean, the Reds and the Orioles dominated the early 70s. Weaver didn't win as much as he probably should have.
Right.
The Reds probably even should have won more than they did with some of the losses they had.
The problem I have with Weaver is that Weaver managed against teams that he probably should have beaten in postseason play. They were better than the '69 Mets. They lost the Pirates in '71. They had a 2-0 lead in that series. They lost the Pirates in '79. They had a 3-1 lead in that series. He didn't manage '66. Weaver managed a good 15 years. He is in the Hall of Fame. Tricky spot with Weaver. The managers who you would consider top 3 in baseball in the Hall of Fame would be La Russa. I'm not Connie Mack's an owner. He's like Hallis. I'm not putting him in there. And I'm not going Bill McKechnie and John McGraw. That's too long ago. Or Wilbert Robinson. Wilbert Robinson managed the Dodgers. Stengel. Here are the guys. Stengel, Torrey, Weaver, Dick Williams, Joe McCarthy, Lasorda, La Russa, Huggins. He had Ruth. Herzog, Bucky Harris, we discussed him a few weeks ago. DeRocher, Cox, Sparky, and Walter Alston. Pick 3 of those 20. Not easy. I think you have to take Stengel. He won 5 in a row. I think you have to take... Now, he had great teams. I mean, Harris won with his teams. Houck won with his teams. So you got to keep that in mind. Buck, he left after 60. Houck won in 61. He got there in 49, and Bucky won in 47, and McCarthy won before that. So keep that in mind. But, I mean, it's hard not to put Casey top 3. 19 in front of the hour here on Mad Dog Unleashed.